Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to George W. Norris Legislative Chamber for the 24th day of the 107th Legislature second session. Our chaplain for today is Pastor Kimberly Belkin, Lutheran Church Salem, Ponca, Nebraska, Senator Gregart's district. Please rise.
Let us pray. God of wisdom, Son of love, Spirit of truth, we thank you for leading our forefathers and mothers to this great state of Nebraska. We thank you for their dedication and perseverance, their faith and commitment, their trust in you, and their hopes and dreams for the future that is ours. We ask your blessing upon the work we will do today in our legislature. May it reflect the things we value and the people we love. May it enable us to carry on the traditions and passions that have been gifted to us by those who have gone before. May our work this day be a lasting commitment to those whom we serve, our fellow citizens of Nebraska. We ask all this in the holy and life-giving name of Christ Jesus, who has loved us from the beginning, saved us from all evil, and will one day deliver us to eternal life. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Belkin. I now recognize Senator John Lowe to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. Please join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, Senator Lowe. I call to order the 24th day of 107th Legislature second session. Senators, please record your presence. Roll call. Mr. Clerk, please record.
I have a quorum present, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Are there any corrections for the journal?
No corrections this morning.
Thank you, sir. Are there messages, reports, or announcements?
I do, Mr. President. Agency reports electronically filed with the legislature can be found on Nebraska Legislature's website. Additionally, lobby reports have been filed with the clerk's office as required by statute. That's all I have this morning, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Members, Senator Brewer would like us to recognize Dr. David Minnick of Broken Bow, Nebraska, who's serving us today as family physician of the day. Dr. Minnick is with us under the north balcony. Doctor, if you could please rise, I'd like to welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. And I understand that some cookies are being handed out on the floor in honor of Senator Matt Hansen's birthday. Happy birthday, Senator Matt Hansen. Moving to the agenda, legislative confirmation reports. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, the first report is from the Agriculture Committee concerning the gubernatorial appointment of Irvin Portis to the Climate Assessment Response Committee.
Senator Halloran, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would have to admit I'm totally unprepared. If you could postpone this down the agenda just a little bit, and I will have what I need for.
We'll come back to you, Senator.
Okay, thank you.
Next confirmation report, please.
Mr. President, the next confirmation report is from the Natural Resources Committee concerning the gubernatorial appointment of Patrick Bergeron to the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission.
Senator Bosselman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Nebraska. Good morning, colleagues. I present for your approval the reappointment of Patrick Bergeron to the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. He came before the committee for his confirmation hearing on January 26th. Patrick Bergeron is seeking reappointment for his second term as commissioner for District 6 for the Nebraska Game and Parks. During his last 4 years, Mr. Bergeron has held an active role in the commission. He has been present in every public meeting within his district, as well as most others within a 2-hour drive. He has been an active participant in the Lake McConaughey Advisory Group, helping to coordinate between Game and Parks and local businesses. Mr. Bergeron is dedicated to keep working on continuing projects that help Nebraskans to provide a quality outdoor experience for all. The Nebraska Game and Parks is governed by a board of 9 commissioners, each member of which is appointed by the governor to a 4-year term. 8 commissioners serve each of 8 districts across the state, and the 9th serves at an at-large role. Commissioners serve in a volunteer capacity and meet in various locations across the state approximately every 2 months. The Game and Parks Commission is charged with stewardship of the state's fish, wildlife, state park, and outdoor recreation resources. The commission is also charged with issuing state hunting licenses, fishing licenses, and boating registrations. It conducts public education programs for hunting and boating safety, and also provides other resources for those who wish to learn to enjoy the outdoors. The committee advanced Mr. Bergeron's reappointment by an 8-0 vote. I ask for the confirmation of Patrick Bergeron to the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission.
Thanks, Senator Bosselman. Senator Erdman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. When you mention the word game and parks, it gets my attention. I've attended several of their meetings. I have been in contact with them numerous times. I have tried to solve the issue that we have in the state with wildlife damages. Their past management was the poorest management of any agency I have ever been exposed to. And these commissioners should have known that. They should have known that. The current appointee, the current director, I believe, after having a conversation with Mr. McCoy, that he may understand the issues that we face. Far different than the last one. And I hold these board members responsible for allowing the management of game and parks over the last 20 years, or however long the manager was there, to be mismanaged, to not know how many wildlife they have, to rely on the information they receive from their management people to be correct without checking the source or proving whether it's true or not. And so I don't believe giving these people a pass on their past performance as commissioners is a good idea. They may be very fine people, they may be upstanding citizens, they may show up for the meetings, but they didn't do the fiduciary duty that they were called to do and manage this agency as it should be managed. So I don't believe there's not one person in here except me may vote no. I understand that. But I want to bring it to your attention that when these people are appointed to these positions, they have a responsibility to do the right thing. And in this area, they have not done the job that they were called to do. So I will be voting no on this reappointment. And until we get control of how these agencies function, we will continue to get what we get in the calls that we get. So I am a no on reconfirming this person's position. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Erdman. I see no other members wishing to speak. Senator Bosselman, did you care to close on the confirmation report?
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee did talk with Mr. Bergeron, and he has talked to us quite a bit about the changes that are being made and this positive attitude of what's happening within the commission and the department. And we think that he's a strong commissioner to be reappointed, and I would appreciate your green vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bossman. Members, you heard the discussion on the confirmation report of the Natural Resources Committee. Those in favor of adopting the report, vote aye. Those opposed, vote nay. Have you all voted here too? Record, please.
34 ayes, 1 nay on the adoption of the confirmation report.
The first of two confirmation reports from Natural Resources has been adopted. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, the second Natural Resources Committee report concerns the gubernatorial appointment of Douglas Zingula to the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission.
Senator Bossman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the legislature, I present for your approval the reappointment of Douglas Zingula to the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. He came before the committee for his confirmation hearing on January 26th. Douglas Zingula was appointed in 2018 by Governor Ricketts to represent the 7th District as a commissioner for the Nebraska Game and Parks. Since its original appointment, he has served on the Financial Legislative Committee, Wildlife and Fisheries Committee, Parks Committee, and a new Director Selection Committee. The Nebraska Game and Parks is governed by a board of 9 commissioners, each member of which is appointed by the governor to a 4-year term. 8 commissioners serve each of 8 districts across the state, and 9th serves as an at-large role. Commissioners serve in a volunteer capacity and meet in various locations across the state, approximately every 2 months. The Game and Parks Commission is charged with stewardship of the state's fish, wildlife, state park, and outdoor recreation resources. The commission is also charged with issuing state hunting licenses, fishing licenses, and boating registrations. It conducts public education programs for hunting and boating safety and also provides other resources for those who wish to learn to enjoy the outdoors. The committee advanced Mr. Zingula's reappointment by an 8-0 vote. I ask for the confirmation of Douglas Zingula to the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission.
Thank you, Senator Bossman. Senator Erdman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I begin on this commissioner, I want to say happy birthday to my wife, Kathy. This makes the 56th birthday that her and I celebrated together, so happy birthday. Now, back to Mr. Zingula. He is of the same commission that the last appointee was, and I have the same issues and comments about him as well. He is from my district. He lives in Sydney. It doesn't appear that they really take to heart the information that is shared with them from the landowners that the damage is significant. Most of these commissioners, most, if not all, are either big game hunters or believe that that is very important, and their idea is to have more, more wildlife rather than less. And so until they change their focus, it's a lot like our broken tax system. Until we change our focus from those who collect the taxes to those who pay, it won't be fixed. And it's the same way with game and parks. Until they change their focus on those who are suffering under the damages of these wildlife, away from those big game hunters and those other people who want more wildlife, we'll never fix the problem. And so I won't be voting for Mr. Zingula either. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator Bossman, would you care to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Erdman. Appreciate your comments. The commissioners are very much aware of your concerns and are working on those specific issues, continuing to do that. And this body has as well over the past year, 2 years, working on those legislatively as well. I will remind the body that there was no opposition to Mr. Zingula's reappointment, and I ask for your green vote. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Bossman. Members, you heard the discussion on the report. Those in favor of adopting the report of the Natural Resources Committee, vote aye. Those opposed, vote nay. Have you all voted? Record, please.
33 yeas, 1 nay on the adoption of the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Now we'll move back to the agriculture report. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, committee report from the Agriculture Committee concerning the gubernatorial appointment of Irvin Portis to the Climate Assessment Response Committee.
Senator Halloran.
Thank you again, Mr. President. Thank you for your good grace and patience. The Agriculture Committee reports favorably upon the appointment of Irvin Portis to the Climate Assessment Response Committee. Mr. Portis is the Assistant Director for the Nebraska Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, appointed to that position in September last year. As the Assistant Director for NEMA, he is responsible for the day-to-day operations of the agency. NEMA supports the Governor's Office and the Adjutant General with the discharge of the statutory requirements identified in the Nebraska Emergency Management Act. The agency also coordinates response and recovery capabilities of state and local government through planning, training, and exercise activities. Mr. Portis replaces Brian Tuma as the NEMA representative on the committee, who retired. Mr. Portis earned a master's degree in public administration and a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. Since then, he had an extensive career in law enforcement and city administration. He served on the Lincoln Police Department for 20 years and 4 years as the chief of the police of the city of Papillion. After that, he served in a series of positions for the city of Jackson, Mississippi, including as city manager, economic development coordinator, and the chief of police. Immediately prior to the selection as assistant director for NEMA, he served 14 years as a city administrator for Plattsmouth, Nebraska. Nebraska's Climate Assessment Response Committee, CARC, was established by the enactment of LB 274 in 1991. The committee serves as a planning and information gathering entity for adverse climate events, particularly drought response and mitigation. It also serves to collect and assess data regarding damages and losses from severe and extreme weather events and to evaluate vulnerability of economic sectors to adverse weather. The specific duties assigned to Climate Assessment Response Committee are listed in Statutes 2-4902. The Climate Assessment Response Committee is budgetarily assigned to the Governor's Office and administratively housed with the Department of Agriculture. Mr. Porter's confirmation hearing was held on January 18th with the appointee in attendance. It is very apparent from his biography and the very thorough and intelligent responses and questions that the committee had that Mr. Portis is well qualified to fulfill NEMA's contribution to the Climate Assessment Response Committee. The recommendation to confirm this appointment was unanimous, and I would move approval of the Ag Committee report.
Thanks, Senator Halloran. Discussion on the report. Senator Clements.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of the confirmation of Irv Portis. He comes from, excuse me, he's been in Plattsmouth, the city administrator for the city of Plattsmouth the last 14 years. I've known him the last 6 years as the state senator for the Plattsmouth area. They've had windstorms with terrible tree damage he had to deal with. They had the major flooding in 2011 and 2019. It took out their whole water system and their sewer treatment plant, and he had to deal with FEMA the last couple years with Plattsmouth getting their services back. And Mr. Portis was very efficient and knew the system well. I think he was a good appointment for the NEMA position, and have found him to be very meticulous and fair to deal with. So I support the confirmation of Irv Portis. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Clements. I see no further discussion. Senator Halloran, did you care to close?
Yes, I would encourage the body to confirm the approve of the Ag Committee report in accepting Mr. Irvin Portis's confirmation.
Thanks, Senator Halloran. Question for the body is adoption of the confirmation report of the Agriculture Committee. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted? Record, please.
35 ayes, no nays on the confirmation report.
Confirmation report has been adopted. Next report, please.
Mr. President, the next report comes from the Education Committee concerning the gubernatorial appointment of two individuals, Nicholas Baxter and Darren Scott Good, to the Nebraska Educational Telecommunications Commission.
Senator Wall is recognized to open on the confirmation report of the Education Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President, and members of the legislature. These reappointments are to the Nebraska Educational Telecommunications Commission. The commission was established in 1963 by the Nebraska Educational Television Act. Its powers and duties include, but are not limited to, promoting and sponsoring non-commercial educational telecommunications throughout Nebraska via broadcast, satellite, fiber optic, computer, and other technologies. This is an 11-member commission, and the appointed members serve a term of 4 years. Commission members do not receive compensation, but are reimbursed for reasonable and necessary expenses incurred in attending the scheduled meetings. Nicholas Baxter is reappointed to a second term as a 2nd district representative on the commission. He serves as vice chair of the commission. Mr. Baxter is a chief risk officer at First National Bank of Omaha. Dr. Darren Good is reappointed to his second term as the private college representative on the commission. He is the president of Nebraska Wesleyan University. Dr. Good received his PhD in biology from the University of Kansas. He previously served as vice president for the academic affairs and dean of the faculty at Whittier College. Thank you for your time, and I ask for the confirmation of Nicholas Baxter and Darren Good. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Walls. Any discussion on the report? I see none. Senator Walls recognizes closed. She waives closing. Question for the body is the adoption of the confirmation report from the Education Committee. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
34 ayes, no nays on the adoption of the confirmation report.
Confirmation report of the Education Committee has been adopted. Next report, please.
Mr. President, the next report is from the Revenue Committee concerning the gubernatorial appointment of Robert Hotz to the Tax Equalization and Review Commission.
Senator Linehan recognized to open on the report.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. President. Robert W. Holtz is Turk Commissioner. He's appointed from the 1st Congressional District of the Tax Equalization and Review Commission, also known as Turk. He was first appointed by the governor on August 20, 2007, and is currently serving a term ending January 1st, 2022. He has served 2 terms as chairman of the commission. He is being appointed to another term that will run from January 2022 to January 2028. Commissioner Holtz is a 5th-generation Nebraska, born and raised in Grand Island. He received both his BA and JD degrees from the University of Nebraska in Lincoln and the Nebraska College of Law. Commissioner Holtz holds a Nebraska State Assessor Certificate and has completed 187 hours of appraisal coursework. In addition, he has completed 30 hours of basic mediation training as recognized by the Nebraska Supreme Court's Office of Dispute Resolution. In 2016, Commissioner Holtz was designated the Tax Judge of the Year by the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy and the National Conference of State Tax Judges. He's also a member of the International Association of Assessing Officers. He also teaches a class on the U.S. Constitution to high school students. He and his wife, Marianne, have 5 children and live in Lincoln. The Revenue Committee unanimously brings Mr. Holtz's reappointment to the legislature. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Linehan. Any discussion on the report? I see none. Senator Linehan recognizes close. She waives closing. Question for the body is the adoption of the confirmation report from the Revenue Committee. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
33 ayes, no nays on the adoption of the confirmation report.
Confirmation report from the Revenue Committee has been adopted. Next report, please.
Mr. President, the next report comes from the Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee concerning the appointment of Jerry Lee Jensen to the State Personnel Board.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Mann Hansen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. On January 21st, the Government Committee held a hearing on the appointment of Ms. Jerry Lee Jensen to the State Personnel Board. Ms. Jensen would be a new member of the board. However, she is not new to the human resources field. Ms. Jensen has over 45 years of experience in HR for the state of Nebraska, including at the State Patrol, DEQ, DAS, and DHHS, where she was a member of the state bargaining team. Now that she is retired, she wants to keep serving, and thus the Government Committee recommends the confirmation of Ms. Jensen's appointment to the State Personnel Board. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Is there any discussion on the report? I see none. Senator Hansen waives closing. Question for the body's adoption of the confirmation report from the Government Committee. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
31 ayes, no nays on the adoption of the confirmation report.
Confirmation report has been adopted. Moving to the next item on the agenda. Speaker Hilgers, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for reading the agenda there. Good morning, colleagues. I wanted to give a brief announcement as to going into next week. Just a few items. Going into Monday, we will have select file debate on our first consent calendar, as well as on some senator and committee priorities, which are ready for the second round. We will also have our our next consent calendar. Some of you have asked me if it wasn't on this consent calendar, does that mean it was rejected or not? We have, in general, it's a rolling consent calendar. So we have identified some that are maybes. We've accepted some, but we haven't listed them on the agenda. There are a few that just don't meet the guidelines. And over the coming week or so, I'll be reaching out to individual senators to talk through those specific bills. The next deadline for consent is next Thursday, February 17th at noon. I don't know exactly when the consents will end. I know we'll have several more weeks. We've received a number of requests. In addition, as a reminder, it's a very important reminder, and I know many of you might express some surprise because it feels like the calendar is, we've just gotten started, but the speaker priority request deadline is next Thursday. Next Thursday, 1 week from today, from yesterday, excuse me, upon adjournment, you have to have your requests in to my office. And we anticipate, given the conversations I've had with colleagues, I certainly anticipate that I'm going to have a lot of requests. I mean, in my opinion, I think I could fill 25 speaker priorities in 10 minutes, given the volume of at least individual conversations I've had. If you know you're going to request one, please, if you can at all possible, get it in as early in the week next week as you can, or even today, because there's a lot of paperwork that my staff has to go through just to be prepared to go through them all. And so the earlier you can get it in, I think the better for us. As a reminder as well, your committee priorities, senator and committee priorities are just the following week. And we went through the numbers this morning. There's 28, so there are 106 total priorities, 25 are speaker priorities. Of the remaining 81, only 28 have been chosen so far. Only 28. If you have it, if you know what you want to prioritize, I cannot encourage you strongly enough to get the letter in and get it on our list so that we can start thinking about how to schedule those. The last thing I think that I have, excuse me, let's make sure I look at my notes for next week. Okay, that's it. Have a good weekend, everyone. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we're now moving to final reading pursuant to the rules. All senators must be at their desks for final reading. Could all senators please be at your desk for final reading? Now commence final reading, Legislative Bill 310. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, gross legislative bill 310 introduced by Clements, Urban, Geist, Lowe, Brewer, McCollister, Albright, Hanson, bill for regulating revenue taxation on 77, 24, 25, 2501, 26, and inheritance tax change exemption amounts prescribed to change individually considered rather than decedent reports. Harness reports duty for revised statute and appeals section be Nebraska revised sections amended read 724 in case father, mother, grandfather, mother, brother, sister, undoubted legal evidence such authorities as law adopted, the law Senate limits adopted such formally laws here prior to acknowledge be spouse any person's right actually shall Students prior to January 1st, 2023, 1% of the clear market value property received excess $40,000. Students diagnosed from 2023% of the clear market value property received for each person excess $1,000. 200 person property interest in manner fourth and size 7 value less than no equally application except on subsequent sections show much subject tax and addition homestead exempt property beyond the mansion not subject to tax case in the age in that section the should 23 years to number subject tax to section 25 and it reads 25 to unit uncle niece nephew race the decedent blood legal adoption linear son the same spouse fighting spouse and supposed to tax shall be age descended prior to January 1st, 2020 13% of clear market value property received excess $15,000 decedent dying on 21st 23 11% of the clear market value property receiving each person excess $4,000 clear market value beneficial interest less than or equal to exempt application statute on subject tax condition interest passing person described in section 1 through 22 years subject to tax section 71 is amended to read 27 purpose section 7705 for relatives to include relative forms spouse decedent married between time of the spouse relative spouse decedent married time of death and relative spouse for decedent parent grandparent uncle niece nephew decedent parent grandchild sibling uncle aunt niece nephews arrived in community tax percent 77 24 25 26 gardens inheritance tax portion section 726 amended to read section other cases in tax repeating seen tax rate prior 80% of clear market value benefits interest person 10,000 days dollars dying on January 1st 15% of clear market value beneficial interest received which is 25,000 clear market value of the beneficial less than equal to the subsection 1 section is not amended to read any tax when interest price passing person 22 subject to tax 25 each per state shall be upon the distribution of proceeds for reporting regarding inheritance tax state treasurer to the county in which the state has been assigned for June 23 July 1st of each year the county treasurer inherent Department of Revenue for Department of Enforcement amount of inheritance generated in 7724 the person receiving property subject to tax on 7724 the amount of inheritance tax revenue generated in 7725 the person subject to tax under the best amount of inheritance tax revenue generated 7726 number of person receiving property tax that was subject to tax under 702 this number of person do not reside in the state receive property that is subject to section 7705 rise of statutes to this chapter 77 article 20 original section 7 2004 2005 2005 2006 revised reissue revised statutes in Nebraska are repealed.
All provisions of law relative to procedure having been complied with, the question is, shall LB 310 pass? Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
Voting aye, Senators Aguilar, Albright, Arch, Blood, Bostelman, Brandt, Breezy, Clements, DeBoer, Dorn, Flood, Friesen, Geist, Gregor, Groney, Holler, Matt Hanson, Hilders, Hilkeman, Hughes, Coulterman, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, Lowe, McCollister, McDonald, Morfeld, Mosier, Merman, Paul, Slama, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, Wishart. Voting no, Senator Ehrman. Not voting, Senators John Kavanaugh, McKinney, Sanders, Bostar, Brewer, Michaela Kavanaugh, Day, Ben Hanson, Hunt, Pansy, Brooks, and Stinner. Vote is 37 ayes, 1 nay, 3 present not voting, 8 excused not voting.
Legislative Bill 310 passes. While the legislature is in session and capable of transacting business, I propose to sign and do hereby sign Legislative Bill 310. Moving on the agenda, General File 2022 Committee Priority Bills. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 890, is a bill for introduced by Senator Walls, a bill for enacting the education, amends several sections, changes the Tax and Equity and Educational Opportunity Support Act as prescribed, creates a fund, eliminates provisions relating to community achievement plans, eliminates obsolete provisions, harmonized provisions, repeals the original section, outright repeals section 79, 21, 22, and declares an emergency. Bill is read for the first time on January 7th of this year, referred to the Education Committee. When we left the bill, Mr. President, there were committee amendments pending as well as a floor amendment from Senator Walls.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Walls, if you'd like to take a couple of minutes to refresh us both on the bill itself and the committee amendment, you may do so at this time.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. LB 890, first of all, creates a education stabilization base aid, which in year 2, we provide $1,100 per formula student. And beginning in year 3, it grows by the basic allowable growth of 2.5%. As a side note, formula students are modified to count 4-year-olds in preschool as a whole child as well as opposed to just 60%. The other thing it does is that it creates educational stabilization base aid or a trust fund from which ESBA is paid. We really looked at how Deb Fisher created the trust fund and the highway fund when we were creating this bill, and that's kind of something that we looked at. We do want to highlight the value in creating this separate fund. It's essential that we have designated funds in the future because we all know that in lean years, and there will be lean years, it's something that we will be able to access and get out to schools. The other thing, or number 3, it takes our allocated income fund from 2.23% to 20% in year 2. The local EFA rate, as you may recall, recalculates the amount of property taxes that a district has to contribute, and it's reduced in year 2 to 75 cents. We have also created district-specific maximum levies to ensure that property tax relief is provided to taxpayers, and we added a statutorily required TIOSA report by the committee to the legislature every 4 years that includes recommendations for any adjustments to the formula needed. FA 71 removes the 20% of basic funding. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Walls. Senator Coltman.
Good morning, colleagues. Yesterday, I put up a bracket motion, MO 142, which would have bracketed it to a week from yesterday. I've talked to all the parties involved, and there's not a lot of consensus that we ought to get together and try and negotiate on this bill. So I'd like to pull that motion at this time.
Bracket motion's been withdrawn. We'll now move to the speaking queue. Senator Erdman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I want to talk a bit about 310 that just passed. First of all, let me start with we're moving way too fast. That was the second bill we passed this year. That's way too fast. We got to slow down. I've heard that before. That might be a little slow, might be good for the people in Nebraska. But I want to talk about what this bill will do to my schools in my district that have a significant number of option students. It could eliminate their school. And I guess that's what the big schools want and what the committee that put this together want, because they surely would have figured that out if they'd done all the research that they did. And we stand up here and we give accolades to all those people that worked all summer long and hard on this job. We all work hard. All of us. All of us put in a lot of time. It's part of our job. We signed up for it. We volunteered for it. We knew that. This bill makes no sense at all. And I will not vote for this bill. Let me speak just a moment about the bill that we just passed. The inheritance tax bill that we passed, LB 310, I thank Senator Clements for having the initiative to bring it. But what I want to explain to you today is this is a perfect example. That inheritance tax discussion is a perfect example why we need the consumption tax. And I'll tell you why. We focused completely, 100%, on those who collect and spend the tax dollars. The counties have a lobbyist, 2 of them, in fact, and they came in and lobbied everybody about it's their money, the county's money, we can't give it up. And they got significant COVID money, 5 years worth in 1 year. But our focus was on those who collect and spend the taxes. That's exactly what it was, 100%. Now, those people who pay the taxes, did anybody see their lobbyist out there lobbying anybody to eliminate it? They did not. Those people don't have lobbyists. And Senator Vargas and I have had conversations over the last 2 or 3 years about paid lobbyists for agencies that receive tax dollars. That is wrong. That is wrong. So the lobbyists for the counties, NACO and those others, were very effective on that issue of the inheritance tax. Very effective. And those people that are listening to me today that are paying the inheritance tax, your opinion does not count. They're not interested in hearing what burdens we put on you by having inheritance tax. All we're concerned about in this room is those who collect and spend the taxes. And until we change our focus and we understand where the money comes from and whose money it is, we will continue to have somebody tell all of these people who inherit things how much money you should pay and when you should pay it. It doesn't make any sense that it is their money, but someone else tells them when to pay it and how much to pay. Doesn't make any sense.
1 minute.
So if the taxes weren't so high and those people who are paying the taxes could hire lobbyists, maybe we'd have a fair chance. But I want to tell those people listening today back home, until we fix this tax system where we take you into consideration, you're going to keep getting what you've always got. And you're going to keep paying what they always want you to pay. That was a mistake, LB 310. It did a little bit of nothing. It may save 2 people something. But in the end, with inflation going up like it is, the value is going up, it'll mean absolutely nothing. And so I didn't vote against that because I don't want to give property tax relief. I voted against that because it was the wrong thing to do. Wrong thing to do. And so I came here with morals, values, and conviction, and I'm not giving them up.
That's time, Senator.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Urban. Senator Breezy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I again want to thank Senator Waltz and folks she worked with on this. They put a lot of time and effort into this, and I admire what they've done, what they've put together, what they've tried to accomplish, and I think all of us appreciate that. And as I indicated previously, conceptually, I agree with what we're talking about here, putting more state dollars into public education. And yes, that should be a goal. It's been the goal of many of us for many years. But let's talk about the combination of 890 and 891. We need to remember that 891 would repurpose the 1107 refundable income tax credit and funnel those dollars into education. And what does the 1107 income tax credit do? It provides essentially a refund of 25.3%. Those are Senator Dorn's numbers, 25.3% currently of your school property taxes paid. And so if we strip that away, we're taking away that tax relief. We're putting those dollars into the formula. And for those schools that do not get a significant amount of relief from this formula, their taxpayers go backwards. I think I gave the example the other day, an Elgin taxpayer would probably have roughly a 20% increase in their school property taxes. And somebody suggested on Twitter, well, no, they've only gotten 6% so far. Well, this year for 21, when they're filing their taxes now, they're going to get roughly a 25% rebate of their school property taxes paid. So it will be an increase on those folks. It will be an increase on a wide swath of Nebraskans. I didn't look down at all of the school districts, but very many of our constituents, very many Nebraskans would see a tax increase from a combination of these two bills as currently presented. And at this point, I do not support moving this to select. And I think There's just too many issues with it. Number one, we have the cap issue and what I consider to be a lack of an effective cap to ensure these dollars yield property tax relief. Well, some people say, well, no, there's a mechanism in there to do that. But I've asked folks if they could explain that to us on the mic. And if somebody wants to explain to us on the mic how that cap mechanism works, I think we would all appreciate that. And I need to know more about that, but it doesn't look to me like it's going to be that effective. You know, and the next issue was the disparity in the treatment of various districts. You know, OPS getting a potential 41%, and I say potential, 41% reduction in their levy, and some districts getting nothing. There needs to be more parity in how that is done. And I haven't heard anyone suggest how we're going to achieve that parity. And finally, the biggest issue for me is how we're going to fund this thing. Utilizing the 1107 credit, I think, for the vast majority of us is off the table. That is direct property tax relief to all Nebraskans, distributed in a fair and equitable manner as the same percentage of school property taxes paid by every Nebraskan. We need to keep that in place. And so how are we going to do this without the 1107 dollars? We're going to have to step it in, pare it back a bunch, find some existing revenue to do it. If you want to talk about comprehensive tax reform, modernization, or a sales tax base, we can talk about that, but I don't think there's the appetite to do that. So I guess I'm open to ideas on how we're going to handle that, how we're going to leave the 1107 dollars alone and see this thing move forward. And if folks have ideas, I'm willing to listen to those ideas, but looking at it with those three areas of concern that I see, I do not see a path forward to this bill. And again, I thank Senator Waltz and the folks who have worked on this and their efforts here, but I think there are far too many trouble spots here to move this forward. And so with that, Mr. President, I'll yield my time back. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Breezy. Senator Morfeld. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Friesen will move to bracket the bill until April 1st, 2022.
Senator Friesen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sorry, Senator Moorfield. So evidently, some school employees want to play Twitter game with me. No districts are at a net loss, Senator Friesen. You're discussing taxpayers being at a potential net loss if 1107 funding can be sustained at 25%. Thank you for admitting ag doesn't pay income tax, has devalued property valuation, and receives the highest number of income tax credits. I've always said that facts don't matter. Thank you, Chip K. We're going to have this discussion here on the floor instead of on Twitter because I don't do Twitter. I do have an account and I love to read your stuff, but a lot of it is worth not even the paper that's printed on. So I handed out some counties at a glance. Our legislative research office does great work and puts out a lot of stuff. It's available on the internet. And I just picked a few pages and I forget what year this was done. This is just happens to be, they did this probably 2-3 years ago. So it's not up to date information, but I think it's consistently what it shows across the state. And so this was like data from 2012 through 16, I believe. And so when you look at this, I just included the median household income of counties, and it's called Counties at a Glance. And so it just looks at, it's not looking at school districts or anything like that. It's looking at county data. And so when we go and it says the state income tax on the next page, the per capita state income tax collected. So it ranks them by county. And since farmers don't pay income taxes, I'm curious to see why Grant County is #1 in the state in per capita income tax collected. That is interesting. Douglas County does come in second. Hamilton County, where I live, is #7. Lancaster County is #8. I'm starting to think that maybe somebody out there is paying income taxes because we seem pretty heavy ag out there. So if you look at the federal income taxes, Oh, Douglas County jumps to the top. That's on the next page. Hamilton County is 2. Lancaster County is up there somewhere, but boy, there's sure a lot of rural counties. I think that's where farmers live. They're in the top. But you know what? We also have poor counties out there. When you get into Sioux, Hayes, Keapaha, Blaine, Logan, Hitchcock, Sheridan, we have some poverty out there. But we don't get school funding out there. Now go to the property tax collections page. Property tax collections per capita. Senator Pauls, you kind of like to talk about that. But when we break it down to per capita, see if you can find your county on there. When I see the #1 county per capita in property tax collections, it's McPherson County. #2 is Arthur. I'm just going to go down the list. It's kind of interesting because it's a long, long ways before I get to Lancaster or Douglas. We can go to Loop, Hayes, Thomas, Blaine, Banner, Gosper, Sioux, Keepaha, Dundee, Perkins, Rock, Frontier, Logan, Fillmore, Greeley, Hooker, Clay, Burt. You get my drift. None of the big counties are anywhere close to the top half. Property tax rate is on the last page. Yes, Douglas County's at the top. You guys love your property taxes. The rates are high, but you got 13 different entities leveraging a tax there. So I want to spend a little time talking about who pays income taxes, who don't, how this bill distributes that money. There are counties out there that are poor, that don't receive anything from the allocated income tax because there's poverty there. Yes, you have a few high payers in taxes, but there is some poverty out in rural Nebraska. What I've always tried to do is bring in some sort of basic funding for those schools who have high cost, 8, 9, 10, 12 kids per class. They can't cut teachers, they can't cut classrooms. They offer an extremely basic education to get their kids through school. And I've heard the comment before from clear in the northwestern part of the state that if they wouldn't have to pay property taxes to their community colleges, with that money, they could get a scholarship for every one of their kids to go to Harvard. So is it fair? When we talk about funding our schools, is our distribution model fair? Does it even come close to being fair? And when you look at the distribution model of this bill, it makes it even worse. There are schools that go backwards, and I will stand on that, and they can come on the floor and try and prove to me that it doesn't. But when you take 1107 money, there are a lot of schools going to go backwards. And the line in the sand for all of the big schools that are getting the money has always been, they don't support basic funding. They don't support giving $1 single to those rural kids. That's their line in the sand. And I'm calling them out. If you care about education, if you care about rural kids at all, where's the funding? To give a small school like that with 8 kids per class, give them $1,000 per student, that's a slap in the face. Their costs are at $28,000 a kid because they're in rural areas. They can't have any more kids in the classroom. They've consolidated. They're driving 50 miles one way to get to their school. I know parents who have bought a house in town that their kids stay in during the week so they don't have to drive back and forth all the time. I'm talking about how we can fairly fund students through our TIOSA formula. There are methods of doing this. LB 890 is not one of them. We're going to talk a lot in the future here about income tax cuts. That, to me, I'll be like the schools now, that puts our general fund at risk for me to get property tax relief. We have a surplus of money, And this is going to be a real interesting session going forward as we trip over ourselves trying to spend it. And I'm, for one, will be one that will say adamantly that we don't all have to spend it this year. I think we can save some of it for the next legislature when I won't have to be here for the cafeteria food fight. They might be better at it than we are. But we're going to have a little fun this session. And we are running short of time, and the pressure's going to get great. And I'm counting down my days. I think it's 36 or 37. We have some important things to do. And I still want to talk about how we can fix our TIOSA formula and make room for some tax cuts. I'm not opposed to that. But first, I need our K through 12 schools properly funded. We have not done that. I'm looking forward to the discussion, and I'm open to working with anybody. But when that line in the sand is where I've been told, I think then our philosophical differences are too far apart, and we're just going to have fun this year. We're not going to accomplish a thing, again, like we haven't for the last 7 years. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Friesen. Debate is now open on the motion to bracket. Senator Moorfeld, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, just want to note a few things. I'm going to yield my time to Senator Walz. First off, Senator Friesen just got done saying we haven't done anything for this last 7 years. I thought 1107 was the big grand thing. Like everybody was running around excited. They were like, wow, we really accomplished something. And yet we kind of treat it like this sacred cow. When I got to be honest with you, my recollection of 1107 was about the closest that I've ever gotten to having a legislative gun to my head in terms of having to vote for it. Because the speaker decided to package two other bills that were really important to me and my district and a lot of other people in the business community with this bill, the underlying, property tax relief portion. And really, a lot of us were left with feeling like we had no choice. I was going to vote against the largest employer in my district. I was going to vote against all of this business incentive package that all of my businesses were telling me that was really important if I didn't vote for this. So I don't understand how 1107 is some big sacred cow that we can't come back and revisit, particularly when many of us were really upset with how that happened. So I just want to note that for the record real quick. There might have been 7 people in a room that were a part of some deal that they all shook on, but I certainly wasn't one of them, and I wasn't happy when I was made to vote on that bill along with 2 other completely different bills that had nothing to do with it. The other thing that I'll say is, and then I will give my time to Senator Walz before I go on a rant here, but the other thing I'm going to say is I was talking to some people in my district who are regular voters, pretty well-informed folks, and I asked them, well, do you know about 1107, what you can take off on your taxes and all that stuff? They had no clue what I was talking about. And the numbers also bear that as well in terms of the amount of people that didn't take advantage of this, quite frankly, because they didn't know about it. And I could go into depth on how we can do this better. And I've come up with some suggestions and people just kind of laugh at me. But the bottom line is when I told them that if we reduce our levy for our property taxes for our schools by 25% and they still come out whole, how do you feel about that? They were very happy about that. And they don't have to go through some weird process with their accountant to be able to claim this on there and hopefully remember it. So I just want to note that I think 1107 is fair game. A lot of people said there was some grand compromise. I wasn't a part of it. It was 7 people in a room that put 2 other completely different bills into it and basically held a legislative gun to our head and said, well, if you don't like it, you're going to have to vote for all these other things you really care about. With that, Mr. President, I'll yield my time to Senator Walz.
Senator Walz, 2 minutes 20.
Thank you, Senator Moorfield. I have a few things to say, but I'm probably not going to get through it all. But I will start with saying that ever since this bill was introduced, the main talking point has been 1107. It hasn't been about the intentionality of 890 or 891. It's really been, every time I talk to somebody, it's what about 1107? What about 1107? So let's talk about 1107 today. 1107 was based on urgency, as Senator Moorfield mentioned. It was a hasty plan. And I'm not saying that it wasn't, there wasn't any thought behind it, but it was simply a vehicle to get two other very, very important pieces, very intentional pieces of legislation across the floor in the 11th hour. That's all it was. And today, we have people in this body that just can't let go of bad policy because of the mindset that we want more, we want it now.
1 minute.
We want it now, we want it now. We can't wait. We can't even take a little less because we want it all and we want it now. We can't be patient and actually agree on a solution. We don't want to think about what could happen to that fund in the future. We want it now. And colleagues, oddly enough, that reminds me, and it sounds a lot like something I hear everybody saying on kids today. They all want it now. I'm going to stop right here and I'll finish in a minute.
Thanks, Senator Walton. Senator Moorfield. Senator DeBoer, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Nebraska. First, I want to say thank you to Senator Walls because I didn't do that on my last time on the mic, and I really do appreciate what she's done here because I think even if you disagree with the bill, you have to recognize that she has developed and used a very good legislative process for trying to get us to a different place, for trying to move us along, for trying to get people together, for building bridges. So thank you, Senator Walls, for that. And, you know, there has been a lot of communication from her office. I had some concerns, and Senator Walls has tried to work on them. She has done, tried to put in different things. We've worked on it, talked about them. And you know what? We haven't gotten through all of them yet. But she has promised to work on things and shown me the things that she's working on between now and select. And I got to reward that kind of, collaborative effort because we're not all going to be able to just agree on everything the first time through. And I do think it helps to keep coming back and forth. I wish we could have at least the opportunity to work on this bill alongside the revenue bill that is its sort of sister bill. There are a lot of elements in this bill, 890, that I'm really pleased with, that I think are really interesting. And I've been saying that since the very beginning, since the first time I heard it. There is for years we've heard we need foundation aid. And, we need to get it out to folks in different areas. And here they've come up with this ESBA idea, which I think is really interesting because there's this stabilizing trust. One of the things that schools have been worried about is that the state's taxing base is a little less stable than property taxes. And here she's come up with a way to stabilize that tax base so that there's not the same concern about ESBA fluctuating in the same way that there might be about something like foundation aid. So I think that's great, having a stabilizing force. And I think that's innovative and it's new. And wow, we can think of new things here, which I think is really cool. She makes sure that every student gets at least $1,100 per student. I understand, Senator Friesen, I've gone through this enough to understand that that may be difficult for some places, but it's something. It's something. It's not nothing. Sometimes maybe we try to start somewhere and then we move from there. We've heard in the bigger schools, those of us who represent them, that we need to have money for every student across the state. That's something that I'm committed to. But what it looks like, we have to work on that. If others have ideas how to do that better, I'm sure she would be open to talking about them. And the funding mechanism. I'm probably not speaking out of turn when I say I think she and Senator Lindstrom would be happy to talk about the funding mechanism. And if folks have ideas about how to change or move around the funding mechanism, I bet she would be happy to do that. So I guess the question I'm asking is, when I first came here and started working on school finance, I asked, what's the number?
1 minute.
How much money do we need to deal with the problem that we're being told about property taxes, about school finance, about all of this? What's the number? And I was told 600 million. 1107 is very close to that number. So why is, I feel like somebody's moving the, Lucy's moving the football again. 600 million is not the number anymore. Somebody tell me what the number is. I want to know what the number is, and then let's figure out how we get to that number. Tell me what the number is. Thank you so much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator DeBoer. Senator Walls, you're recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I just want to kind of continue on the 1107 talk. This morning I woke up really, really early. I'm going to kind of put on my teacher's hat now. I woke up really early and I had this very humorous image. And it really kept running through my mind over and over again. And the image was an image of a man bleeding. And he had this huge Band-Aid on his arm. And there was a big black pot. And there was a foreman with a yellow hard hat on her head. And there was a little guy running around with a wheelbarrow, just back and forth, back and forth. And the image starts with the little man wheeling the barrel up to the big black pot. It was not completely full of money, but there was a lot of money in there. And the little man was shoveling the money out of the black pot as fast as he could. And he's getting as much as he could out of that little black pot. Then he would take the wheelbarrow full of money and he would dump it over a cliff. And the money went everywhere, but it went nowhere. And then he would sigh a little sigh of relief, and he'd smile a little bit until he looked up at the man who was bleeding, and the man pulled back the Band-Aid to check to see if he was still bleeding. And he sighed and was like, still bleeding. So he called out to the foreman and he said, we're still bleeding. And the foreman called out, we need more money. We need more money, more money. So the little guy with the property tax credit fund wheelbarrow would run back over to the pot, shovel in more money as fast as he could, wheel it quickly back over to the cliff, and dump it over. And the money went everywhere, but it went nowhere. That went on and on and on. He would dump it over the cliff. He would look at the man that was bleeding. The man would pull back his Band-Aid to see if the wound had been healed, and it was still bleeding. Back and forth. Still bleeding, he would yell. I actually started laughing about 4:30 this morning because I couldn't believe how absurd it is to just throw $500 million over a cliff. And that's what you're doing when you can't sit down and talk about repurposing 1107. You're just throwing it over a cliff. That's what happens when you can't think intentionally. That's what happens when you can't be a little patient and actually repair the wound that continues to bleed. Colleagues, 1107 is about equal to half of the total budget we spend on education. I'm not saying, It is half. I'm saying about. We're taking a total of half of what we
1
spend
minute.
on education and we're dumping it over a cliff without any investment, without any return. That is absurd. It is the most irresponsible use of funds. And I thought I was among a bunch of business people. No return on investment. If you want to continue down this path, you vote no on LB 890. If you don't want to find a solution to the wound and stop the bleeding, you vote no on LB 890. But I think it's an absolute waste of $500 million without any return on investment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Wall. Senator Linehan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Senator Walls yield to a question, please?
Senator Walls, would you yield?
Certainly.
I couldn't follow from what you just said. Who's wounded and bleeding?
It was just an image that I found. So who's?
But okay, but I mean that's kind of important.
I would say the property tax issue is what's wounded and bleeding.
Well,
there's an issue, and we're not fixing
Thank you,
it.
Senator
Okay.
Walls. I think to be wounded and bleeding, it has to be somebody that's alive. So I can't figure out if it's the schools that are wounded or bleeding or the property taxpayer. I didn't follow that at all. It's absurd. And I am going to join him here with Senator Friesen. Several of us in this body have worked for the whole time we've been here. Him, 8 years. I'm now in my 6th year on school funding. So no, I don't appreciate when Chip K tweets. I've never seen a conversation surrounding tax concerns of schools with 35-cent levies. In case we don't know, he's talking about NERCSA schools, or some of them. Many of them are much higher than that. And a lack of understanding how net option funding is funded. And then he makes a funny face. Or how current lids work, 2 funny faces. Or where Linehan gets her data, 3 funny faces. Or that net option schools come out behind. I get my data from the Department of Education, the US Census Bureau, from the Legislative Fiscal Office. I actually work with data. Somebody joked once, do you actually know the levy of every school district in the state of Nebraska? I said, no, but a lot of them. Do I actually know where the net option funding goes? Yes, it's $100 million that comes out of TIOSA. And there's a lot of data that just gets ignored by the very people who are on Education Committee. We don't spend $1 billion on state funding on school funding. That is the TIOSA money. It's $1.08 billion. That's what we spend in TIOSA. There is another $500 million that we spend in other state funding on schools. So it's $1.5 billion. I've only said that 5 times during this debate. So I'm sorry, $548 million is not half of $1.5 billion, it's a third. So it is kind of important that we actually understand the numbers when we're talking about this. And then to earlier comments that this was a last-minute deal thrown together, oh, please. This deal, 1107, took 2 legislative sessions, a whole summer break of meetings on, what is those meetings? You know, the meetings we've all been doing, over the computers from mid-March till we came back in July. Then, you're right, we had the group of 10, then went to the group of 7, and we got a compromise. That's what legislatures do. And yes, people voted for things they didn't like. We had a whole bunch of people. I think, Senator Friesen, when you yield for a question.
Senator Friesen, would you yield?
Yes, I would.
Did you like all of 1107?
No,
You actually really didn't like quite a big part of it, did you not?
I have told people that I had to go home and take a shower after that vote.
Thank you. Senator Brandt, would you yield to a question?
1 minute. Senator Brandt, would you yield?
Yes, I would.
Did you vote for 1107?
Yes, I did.
Did you like everything in the bill?
No, I did not.
Did you like the property tax credit fund?
That got me to vote for the bill.
Thank you. Senator Hollering,
Senator
would you
Halloran,
yield?
would you yield?
Did you vote for 1107?
I certainly did.
Did you like everything in that bill?
I rarely like everything in any bill.
Right. Did you
I
like
mean,
the
there's-
property
There's
tax?
always something I don't like. Yes, I did. I like the property tax.
Do your taxpayers like a 25% refund on the property taxes they pay for their general funds for schools?
They do, and they understand the 2-click method that you pointed out yesterday.
Yeah,
to
2
get us.
clicks. Yeah. And I'll be real quick. I think it's insulting to the public when we stand up here and say that people can't figure it out. It's insulting. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Halloran, Senator Friesen, Senator Brandt, Senator Walls, and Senator Linehan. Senator Friesen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I think I've numerous times said on the floor that there are better ways to distribute the 1107 money. I'm not opposed to it. I just want to do it right. I want to do it to help those non-equalized schools out there. And if there's money left over to do things with, I would help get the LER down. I would come up with a combination to where we can at least get some funding out to these rural schools that get 0.5% of their budget from the state. I have always maintained that I will support something to redistribute that money. I have no problem with that. The only way I think I can protect it when I'm gone is to put it in the TIOSA formula. Because I think leaving 1107 funds currently as they are, it puts it at risk when our revenue turns down. And we're going to have that time. We all know that. I'm a farmer. We go through these cycles all the time. We have good income. We cycle down to the low income. We have to make cuts. We're going to do that here again. I won't be here. But somebody's going to have to make some cuts, and they're going to go after the 1107 money because it's an easy fund to go after. I won't even blame them. They're going to do what they have to do to balance the budget. I do know that they won't raise taxes. They won't increase the tax rate. We've tried broadening the sales tax base. We've tried raising the income tax rate. Failed every time. We have tried to find a dedicated funding source, blocked every time. Now, when we finally got the money, that was my goal. Let's raise the pot of money. I was always trying to raise money and redistribute at the same time. Always somebody didn't like one half of that equation or the other. Now I'm thinking, okay, we've got the money set aside. Now let's figure out a way to put it in the TIOSA formula. And right away, the big schools want all of it. Let's give a little dribble out there to the non-equalized schools, make them feel warm and fuzzy, but I'm talking about the taxpayer. You may hold the schools harmless, but not the taxpayer. That's who I'm looking out for. I'm looking out for the guy that's paying that tax, that school out there that's 92% funded by ag. They're not in my district. If I just look at my district, this bill isn't so bad. It does them pretty good, except for Grand Island Northwest. They take a 25% haircut, but now, no big deal. It's the taxpayer that takes the cut, not the school. So yeah, I am pretty protective of 1107. Yes, it came up in a hurry, but a lot of people voted for it. We all saw the effort on the floor to filibuster it right at the end, and it was like standing on the railroad tracks. There was nothing going to stop it. It's an amazing thing. When you get to the end of a session and there's a lot to be done and the pressure's on. So for me to waste time my last 37 days is going to be no problem at all. I've got all the time in the world. I'm going to be like Senator Chambers. Time means nothing. Sometimes he'd just stand here and look around. Wouldn't say a word. You don't have to talk your whole 5 minutes. It gives people time to contemplate what you've said.
1 minute.
I've learned a lot from Senator Chambers. If you'll dig back to our first bill that I was in a filibuster back in the day, we tried to raise the marriage license fee. And if you go back to those transcripts, you can find a classic one-man filibuster and all the motions you need to make in order. You can print that out, put it in your desk here, like it's been in mine, and you can have a one-man filibuster for a long time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Friesen. Senator Salami, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. I rise today, I'm still in consideration of LB 890, but since I'm getting on the mic to join Senator Friesen in talking today, I guess you can probably understand where I'm at. At this point, I would normally say something nice about Senator Walls and the amount of work she's put into this bill, and I really do appreciate the senators who have come around the table to put this thing together. But we're getting to a point now where it's getting a little chippy. And we're getting into a little bit of revisionist history about what LB 1107 is and what it means for our state. So I'm going to just skip through the niceties because they're worthless anyways. This bill isn't going to pass. Who cares? LB 1107 is the largest property tax relief bill passed since the 1960s when we just decided to get rid of property taxes altogether, and that was by a vote of the people. So I guess you could say this is the most the legislature's ever done for property taxpayers in this state. So now we're hearing that that relief, that $500 million, is a waste without a return on investment. Please tell that to the property taxpayers when they're getting checks this spring for 25% relief on their school taxes paid. We hear in this body all the time, what's good for Omaha is good for the rest of the state. We hear it every time a bill that's brought up that impacts only Omaha, but we should all support it because, you know, we're all beneficiaries. But when rural interests are given an inch with the bill that tries to help them, we're asked to give urban interests a mile in exchange. LB 890 is the perfect embodiment of that approach. We're raiding the funds from the most impactful piece of legislation we've passed for property taxpayers in this state to dump into new funding and a different form of spending. Sure, we're giving a little bit more funding to small schools, but once again, urban districts will be the biggest winners of this bill that's going to spike our property taxes again in rural areas. Now rural senators are being told to be patient. Comparing rural senators and those who have advocated for property tax relief for decades and fair funding for rural schools for funding to children screaming, we want it now. So you're right, Senator Walls. I am impatient. I am tired of coming in here year after year to fight for our rural schools and our rural students. We live in a great country where every kid in the United States, no matter what your background is, no matter what you've been through, no matter what you face, you have a chance to make something of yourself, break cycles of poverty, break cycles of drug addiction, and that's in getting an education. And I am so proud of all of our schools in the state of Nebraska, public, private, homeschool, doesn't matter because they give kids a chance. And in this state, we say that we value kids if they're sitting in an urban classroom, like in Papillion, in Omaha, in Lincoln. We value them more than that kid sitting in Kippahaw County, that kid sitting in Cherry County, that kid sitting in Pawnee County. We tell that kid, somebody else can handle the bill. And that's how we fund our rural schools in this state. And if we attempt to change that, we get a bill like 890 where we go, well, we could try to address that, but we're going to raise your rural property taxes too. We're going to compromise the one economic driver your area has, agriculture, in order to fund this small change
that you want. So you're right, Senator Walls. I am tired.
1 minute.
Thank you. I am so tired of being told that our rural students aren't worth it. They're not worth the investment of the state of Nebraska. And if we want even a small investment in their futures, in our rural communities' futures, that we have to sacrifice the most impactful piece of legislation we've passed in this body in a decade. Oh, and while we're on bad policy, which I believe 890 is, I think it's bad policy to waste this body's time on a bill that we all know doesn't even have 25 votes for cloture. We've wasted a week of this body's time having a great discussion about property taxes. I'm with every single property tax relief advocate in here and having that discussion, but this is a waste of time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Salama. Senator Manhattan, you recognized?
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. I rise to continue talking about LB 890, and I wanted to touch upon kind of a wide variety of things. First and foremost, I will just kind of respond to rural versus urban. I really try hard to not wade into that. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. For me, sometimes it's a Lincoln Senator thing, and I will be open and honest when I am doing that. But if the notion that this body is skewed to favor the big cities, is skewed to favor the urban districts, for me is simply not the case. I don't mean to hold a prop, but look at the budget priorities for the state this year. Look at what the governor proposed. Looked at where the ARPA funding is proposed, and figure out where those are going. Those are not going to Lincoln. They're not going to Omaha. They're going to rural areas. They're going to rural housing. They're going to canals in western Nebraska. They're going to lakes outside of cities. It's not actually going to local places. And perhaps the most obvious and painful one about that, about like what kind of priorities do we have? And we turned down federal money for housing. Like, we're gonna have a hearing on that today because the governor just turned down federal money for housing that would benefit renters, that would just benefit people who live in cities. So if we're gonna talk about this is an urban focused legislature, like if that's your take, I understand it. That's not my take at all, and I don't believe many other people who live in Lincoln and Omaha and some of the other big cities or suburbs feel that way. We feel like we have to scrap and claw and defend and go to cloture to just not have things backslide. And that's where I'm coming from. And I appreciate that because I think that's showing the evidence of why things are going so far and being so hard. You know, we've had some senators talk today that, a lot of things are just going to get bogged down this session and we're at an impasse and there's no room to compromise. I don't disagree. Like, I don't want to threaten that. I don't want to promise that. But like, if they're basically what I've heard people throughout this debate, in the last couple tax bills say is not on the table, I really don't think there's a path forward. I think we are going to have to probably just call it a draw this year. We can decide if we want to prioritize all these bills and spend 8 hours, 4 hours, whatever on each one, or we can just move on, pick other priorities, change the schedule, whatever we need to do. I do genuinely think we're at an impasse. And I'll throw myself in the ring of people who have spent a considerable amount of time on this. I'm not going to put any of myself in the top half or the top 10, but just for context, everybody, the last time before COVID, I remember that we had the last normal day we had before COVID. The last thing I did in this meeting before I left is I hosted a meeting in my office. Main reason I hosted it is because I had a decent conference table, but I hosted a meeting in my office where we had probably close to a dozen of us talking about school funding and about taxes. That was the last thing I did in a normal session when we can all just sit around and talk. And it was a really broad group. That didn't lead to anything, but that was an attempt. And that was, again, a number of us have repeatedly attempted on multiple issues. I said yesterday, if there's a line in the sand that you're not willing to cross, I really appreciate it when people just say it out loud and make it clear, because that's what I'm doing too. And I think once we start stacking all these up, we're going to show that we don't have much room to navigate. And if we know that, we know that, but we can kind of stop some of the suspense or surprises or things to stop. I don't want to bog everything down. I don't want everything to stop, but we keep tying all these bills together, and you voted this way on this bill, so logically you should vote this way on that bill, or vice versa. Fair debate, but again, they're all tied together, and that's the struggle we're going to get at. I mean, for me, one of the things that I always struggle with, and this is what I intentionally.
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I'll just hit my light again. I'll get into my numbers. Again, colleagues, we have talked about what we can and cannot do, and I appreciate that. I agree. This bill's probably in trouble. The next bill's probably in trouble. Lots of things are just going to be in trouble because we're at an impasse and we can't agree on how we want our state to look, and it's tough. It's tough. I don't enjoy this. I don't expect anybody to enjoy this. But if you think that there's some benefit to being an urban senator in this body, I just want to clear, I don't feel that. I feel like I have to fight tooth and nail for my constituents to just get recognized a lot of the time. Thank you, Mr. Senator. Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Hansen. Senator Breeze, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excuse me. Good morning again, colleagues. I want to make a couple comments about a few things that were said and then talk about Twitter a little bit. We need to remember the 1107 compromise that people express angst over was a result of we had an effort to reform education funding at that time. We moved it along with the business incentive package, the UNMC project. And as Senator Friesen indicated, there was a lot of us, and Senator Linehan, there was a lot of us in here that were not very happy with all components of that. But the 1107 compromise at the end really represents what it's like to come together, swallow hard on a few things, and do what's best for our state, come together with a package that moves everybody forward. Did I like all aspects of the business incentive package? Did Senator Friesen, did Senator Haller and others? Likely not. The UNMC project, all aspects of it? Likely not. We had our eyes set on education funding reform at that time. But it is what it is. That's what we ended up with was 1107. That was what we ended up with as a result of a compromise to get everybody moving forward, to get the state moving forward, to get the thing across the finish line. And for someone to suggest that it's bad policy, that it's absurd, things of that sort, I don't think those taxpayers that are getting 25% of their school property taxes back would agree with that. We're giving taxpayer dollars back to taxpayers, and I'm very reluctant to ever call that absurd or bad policy. And suggest we're wasting an opportunity. No, when we're giving money back to the taxpayers, giving their tax dollars back, we're not wasting resources there. And Senator Friesen, you indicated that you have a Twitter account. Well, I don't even have a Twitter account. But I had some people tell me what's on Twitter, and I thought maybe I'm going to have to get an account. I don't know. You know, someone on Twitter suggested I don't know what I'm talking about because it's not going to be a 20% tax increase for the taxpayers up at Elgin if we put these two together because they haven't gotten their 25% yet. They've only gotten 6%. But they're going to be getting a 25% refundable income tax credit for their school property taxes paid for tax year 2021. Those folks are getting it right now. So yes, this does represent, the combination of these two bills would represent a tax increase on a wide swath of Nebraskans. It was also suggested that when I spoke to a group of school board members a week or so ago that I indicated zero willingness to make a compromise on 890 to 891. No, I expressed my concerns about 890 and 891 and the combination of those, and I laid out the three main reasons why. But I was asked by someone in the crowd, what is my willingness to cough up part of the 1107 money? And I said, I have zero tolerance for that. The 1107 money should be off the table. And someone also said on Twitter that I lack an understanding. I lack understanding of the potential cap that is supposed to be in this bill. And again, I'd like to have somebody explain on the mic to me how this bill has a mechanism in it to ensure these dollars yield property tax relief. As I see it, any purported cap in this bill boils down to the budget authority for the general fund budget of expenditures of 79-1023 plus the exclusion, thank you, Mr. President, plus the exclusions of 79-1028. And there are several exclusions here. Those funds necessary for, I'm kind of paraphrasing them here, not describing them very accurately, but funds necessary to pay for natural disasters and judgments and retirement incentives, distance education, excess employer contributions, voluntary termination incentive policy or programs prior to 09, grant funds, federal impact aid, new elementary attendance site, so on. And again, I paraphrase some of those. I'm not extremely accurate probably on what I'm describing there, but you get the point there. There is a litany of exclusions that add to the potential budget authority here, that adds to the potential ability to levy property taxes. It takes away from the ability of any purported cap in this bill to ensure these dollars yield property tax relief. If I'm wrong on that, I'd welcome an explanation on the mic.
That's
Thank you,
time,
Mr.
Senator.
President.
Thanks, Senator Breezy. Senator Blood, you recognized?
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow senators, friends all, I don't believe I've spoken at all on this bill. And this is likely the only time I will speak on this bill. Because I saw this as an opportunity to be a learning experience, and I wanted to hear from everybody that had words of wisdom, which weren't all the comments, but words of wisdom on the mic. I was tickled to hear people talking about Twitter when some of those same people are the ones that always say, I don't even pay attention to social media. So it was kind of entertaining to all of a sudden hear people reading things off Twitter. But that's the world we live in right now. But the thing that I find concerning, and really the reason that I'm standing up, is sometimes I think we get to the point where we get out in the weeds when we have opportunities to come together and maybe fix something that we don't like. I remember a lot of the bills that we've talked about on the mic during this bill happened because people got together under the balconies and tried to make it better and tried to figure out, if we give you this, can we have that? And I'm just not seeing that on this bill. I'm just seeing an all or nothing approach. I saw some feelings that were supposedly hurt at the beginning of this discussion when we very first started debating about how people supposedly hadn't been contacted about it. But I know that most of the senators that I talked to had been contacted a minimum of one time, but I could be mistaken. And I didn't talk to every senator in the body. So I certainly don't want to speak for every senator in the body. But when I hear comments like this bill is going to die anyway, and so I'm going to take time on the mic, I think of all the bills that we've ended up passing because that was the intent when people first started filibustering, and then folks came to the table in the bipartisan spirit that this unicameral is all about. But not everybody has that bipartisan spirit, and it's really just unfortunate. So I would ask that Senator Walz, who I know is talking to her staff, if she would please yield.
Senator Walz, would you yield?
Yes.
I'm sorry about that, Senator Walz.
That's
Make you
okay.
run back on. Senator Walz, as you heard, I've not spoken on this bill because I saw this as a learning experience, and it was really interesting to hear people's opinions. So I want to just bring this back down to the most basic level, and I have a question for you. Why did you bring this bill forward?
We brought this bill forward because we know that there is a problem with property tax for property taxpayer. We know that there is a problem for homeowners to receive direct property tax reductions on their monthly mortgages, on their property tax statements. And that was something that was really important. The other reason why we brought this bill is that we really wanted to take in consideration our education system. We did not want to bring a bill that would hurt our education system because it's so important to the future of our state. And so we wanted to be able to do both. We wanted to be able to provide adequate school funding as well as provide significant property tax relief.
I'm going to ask you to take it to a more personal level. Why is education so important to you personally? Because I feel like that's the passion that we haven't heard. And I know, because I've known you for 6 years, how passionate you are about education and about how you believe it's the right of every child to have the opportunity to be educated. And
1 minute.
can you take my last minute and speak from the heart and tell us why education is
Absolutely.
important?
You know, it was, I was really surprised to hear Senator Slama say that this was a proposal that didn't take into account all children in Nebraska. I mean, as education chair and as a past teacher, one of the things I will tell you that is number one priority and our number one focus is our students and our kids, and making sure that we're providing a quality education to every child. It doesn't matter if they live in Bridgeport or Hay Springs or Grand Island or Columbus or Fremont or Omaha. This was a bill that did address and provide funding for every single student across the state. Every
This time, Senators.
single student.
Thank you, Senator Walls and Senator Blood. Senator Bosselman, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess there's a couple things we want to talk about today, and in a minute I'm going to ask Senator Friesen if he'd yield to some questions, because I think we need to address a couple things here. But, you know, I think it's a little disingenuous in saying this is it. Everything's about this bill. Well, I've been here 5 years, and there's been bills come to this floor. Senator Friesen has brought bills to this floor, I think almost every year, if not every year, to try to compromise, try to work, has met with everybody, all the stakeholders within that time frame. Nope, can't do it. Nope, can't do it. Can't even talk about it. It gets killed right away. So now all of a sudden, oh, this is it. And my understanding is what I read on this, half of my district benefits from it and half it doesn't. This is about property taxes. This is about good education for our students and ensuring that our schools receive the appropriate funding that they need, but also making it on the tax side not such a heavy burden on taxpayers. Senator Friesen, would you yield to some questions?
Senator Friesen, would you yield?
Yes, I would.
So, Senator Friesen, you said earlier, you talked about you're willing on 1107. You could see where there's some flexibility there where we could need to move that into some formulas or someplace that actually would make a difference for everybody. Is that correct?
Yes. I've always been willing to, that was my goal way back in the day, so I've not changed from that.
All right. And I agree. I don't disagree. It's interesting. You had some handouts here, and I want to talk about them a little bit. There's one of the handouts you gave was from Chip K, a tweet for Chip K, at Chip_K. And in this thing, it says that you admit that ag doesn't pay income tax. Is that right?
I don't know when I admitted that, but I guess I must have missed that.
Well, on the handouts, I do believe it shows where you had some other handouts here, income tax being paid, and actually per capita in the state of Nebraska, our rural districts, if you will, Grant, Dual, Polk, Boone, Hamilton, Fillmore, they're paying the most, aren't they?
Yes, by far.
And I guess those are all urban communities that is paying that, if I understand that right, from what Chip's saying, that's all urban?
These counties?
Yeah, I mean, is that?
I don't think there's much urban population in Grant County.
So they're ranchers and farmers?
That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that's where they live.
So they're probably paying income tax.
Well, it appears that way. Somebody is.
No,
There's not many residents in some of those counties. They are pretty sparse.
So would you agree that our county assessors has devalued property valuations?
Well, I'm assuming they're referring to the ag land as being taxed at 75% versus 80 or 100, but I'm not sure what he was referring to, how we devalued.
Right, I don't either. I can tell you as a landowner myself, I don't think my land's been devalued at all. I think I'm paying more than my share in taxes on that.
Well, I think if you start really digging into the data, you can see where residential property values have been held down and not ag land.
And it says we receive the highest number of income tax credits. Farmers and ranchers do. Is that right?
No, it's not. And I don't know the exact number, but it's somewhere in that 30% range is what ag gets from 1107. So 70-some% of it roughly goes to the urban residential commercial property owners. So No, it's not, by far, not heavily ag centered.
So I imagine I'll get some
1 minute.
ugly tweets as well coming from this conversation we're having right now. But your handouts really do show that what people are paying where on property tax rates, on income tax, and that it really does show that rural Nebraska, outstate Nebraska, is really paying more than their share of taxes. Would you, per capita?
That's the way I feel. And by having to fund our schools the way we do without state aid, it takes money out of our rural communities that we can try to have economic development and grow our communities right now, because we are paying that full bill. The state doesn't help. It lowers our resources for doing more in those communities.
And make no mistake, I totally support our schools. We need to fund our schools as much as they need to be funded, but we need to find that better way in order to do that. And I don't believe we're there with ALB 890. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Bosselman and Senator Friesen. Senator Linehan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Maybe I miscommunicated here about my concerns on 890, of which I do not support, or 891, which is in the Revenue Committee. What I meant to say, if I didn't say it clearly, is we as committees have the issues that we are supposed to address. And revenue and how we collect it is in the Revenue Committee. So it's not about how I feel, it's about a bill put together to spend $730 million. And the Revenue Committee has spent very little time on this. And it's not because we aren't working hard, we're working really hard. But 891 is in the committee. I don't think it's coming out of the committee. I'm quite certain it's not coming out of the committee, and no one has even prioritized it. So this is, you can't, which many of us realize because we tried, again, ever since we've been here, and specifically the last legislature, we tried to do education, do a bill, and then actually the speaker said we couldn't do it. Then revenue and education had to have joint hearings, and then we had to bring the appropriations in. Here's the bottom line. If we are ever going to do this, which I have been trying to improve school funding since I've got here, it's not a one committee deal. It just isn't. You have to have in the room, first, probably as important as it, well, maybe, depends. I'm not gonna, you have to have appropriations in the room. You have to. I don't know how involved the Appropriations Committee has been or chairman, but I don't get a feeling that they've been much more involved in the Revenue Committee. You're never going to get a big thing like this done without all three of those committees. And going back to the Twitter, I don't. The senator asked me yesterday if I saw something on Facebook or whatever, and I go, I don't even look at it. Mostly I don't look at it because my children, who aren't even, they're adults now, just think it's better if I don't, and they're right. I've learned it doesn't really matter. I don't care. But when we have public officials who feel it's quite okay to tweet remarks about the intellect or the abilities of 4 state senators, I don't think that's okay. This isn't some political group or a political party tweeting about us. I expect that. This is about public employees. And the lack of respect, we should all be very, very concerned about the lack of respect that shows for the legislature. I've said this before, and I know several of you disagree with me. I don't like term limits. I've never liked them. But when we have them, which we do, it is critically important for this body to stick together when it comes to respect for each and every one of us. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't belong to this party or that party or this group for a cause. That's different. This is public employees thinking it's just fine to make fun of 4 or 5 sitting senators. It's not okay. And none of us should think it is. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Linehan. Senator Walls, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess what I want to do at this point is really just take a step back and just talk about all the positive things. We've been talking about a lot of negative things this morning. And I guess I just want to take a step back and talk about all the positive things that have happened over the month. Starting with the leadership of 2 educators from Columbus, Nebraska, that made the decision to become part of a solution that is good for our students, a solution that is good for our schools, and a solution that's good for our taxpayers. And I will be, I'm going to be the first to say that Troy and Chip showed true leadership. They showed true leadership skills, creating a brilliant school funding proposal that brings 186 schools into equalization and provides a reduction in tax levies in nearly all the school districts. And over the past few months, I've heard over and over and over again that this is one of the best proposals that's been brought to the legislature for our schools and for our students and for our taxpayers. It had the big picture, all 3. Secondly, I want people to understand that it was really important to me that we bring every single school district to the table. Whether you are equalized or not equalized, urban or rural, it was really important that we brought every representative to the table. And because of that effort, here's the important thing. Because of that effort, trust was built. Regardless of where you lived or what location you represented, we built trust. And we had a common goal to provide funding to all schools and all kids. And colleagues, I think that is unprecedented. That has never happened, to my knowledge. The fact that this proposal unified all schools, we never thought that would happen, ever. And schools will tell you they never thought that would happen. I think that through this process, we've become stronger advocates for education. We've become stronger advocates for kids, and we've become stronger advocates for our communities and our constituents. And honestly, that's something that a red light or a green light cannot take away. So whether or not this bill passes, our priority throughout this whole process and the things that we did accomplish by unifying schools, I think it's a win. The fact that we as an education community are unified and that we're stronger is a win. There are a lot of people who were involved in this proposal. That includes school board members, superintendents, GNSA, STANCE, NERCSA, And I really, really appreciate their leadership and stepping up. That's all. Thank you for now, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Wallace. Senator Clements, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I really want to thank everyone for your expressions of sympathy on the passing of my father. I've been overwhelmed with your graciousness, and I thank you for that. And we had a wonderful celebration of life last Saturday. I'm rising in opposition to LB 890. I did watch the presentation of this plan when the creators of it were educating people about it. And I got to the end and I saw there was no funding plan to where they were going to pay for $700 million of spending. And I'm on the Appropriations Committee. We've got $4 billion worth of spending requests for ARPA money. It's really easy to propose spending, but where you're going to come up with it is, I think it's not a full plan when I was told, well, the legislature will just have to figure that out. In the 1107, the current 25.3% property tax credit is guaranteed, and now it's been indexed with inflation thanks to Senator Breezy's bill, and that gives some protection to the property taxpayers as valuations go up, that our property tax credit will go up and give them something real that they can rely on. This plan has no guarantee in the future for property tax relief. Taking the lid from $1.05 to 95 cents is not much of a limit. I might be more interested if you were talking about 75 cents. But and then plus the 10-cent building fund outside the levy, and allowing that to be a vote of the board to build new buildings without a vote of the people, that's another objection I have. Then the option enrollment, there's no more $10,000 payment for option students. There's going to be, I think, little incentive in the future for school districts to accept option enrollment. And that I think there are students that could really use a change from different schools, but when they're not going to be rewarded with the cost of educating those students, I doubt that it would be as popular as it is today. With that, if Senator Friesen would like the rest of my time, I'd yield to Senator Friesen.
Senator Friesen, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Clements. So there's been a misperception, I guess, that most of this 1107 money or the property tax credit relief fund goes to ag. So I've got an analysis of where, first of all, how much each school gets in TIOSA aid, and this for 22-23, and each school, how much they would get from the first tier, the property tax credit relief fund. That's that $313 million. And then I've got the 1107 money that's currently at $548 million. And I have a total of what each goes to each school, and in the percentage of that total fund that school receives. So the other day I was kind of picking on David City Public Schools, so we'll start with that one. They get $130,000 in TIOSA. They get, in the end, 0.18% of that total pot of money. Arnold Public Schools, 0.07% of that pot of money. Omaha Public Schools gets 20.49% of that giant pot of money. Elkhorn, 2.2, Millard, 6.1, Grand Island, 3.99. And then you've got Hampton, 0.07. So there's the distribution of those dollars. There's a lot of it goes to the urban residential homeowner. If they just file their income tax, get the credit, it's there. But you do have to file your income tax. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Friesen, Senator Clement. Senator McCosker, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I haven't spoken on this bill yet, and I'll do it now. I need to congratulate Senator Walz on bringing this bill forward and the major accomplishment of getting all the school districts to agree. That's hard to do, so I salute Senator Walz for that. With regard to social media and Twitter, I've got some experience, 3 years of experience with that. Received a lot of slings and arrows during that time, but it is a great way to communicate with people, and you can really communicate with a lot of people that way. I served 2 years on the Revenue Committee, and we went through numerous iterations of bill for school financing using that Revenue Committee. I would guess we probably killed 5 or 6 trees with all the spreadsheets that we developed for that effort. And I think we recognized then with that failed effort, it would take a major effort, like we did for 1107, LB 1107, to get the bill passed. With our filibuster rules that we have, it's so easy to stop a bill. And that's why 1107 was so successful. We brought those groups together and we were able to get that bill passed. And I think that's what it's going to take for LB 890 as well. I think we need to, when this bill moves forward, we need to engage all the partners, all the stakeholders, and get together and get this bill passed, similar to the effort that we had with 1107. That's what we need to do. And I think we also need to talk about the income tax bill that's coming next week, LB 939. Are we going to go 8 hours on that without success? I think we need to bring all the stakeholders for that bill together so we don't waste time in this body. We're going to be discover soon, I believe, that we're wasting a lot of time with filibusters when if we did some advanced preparation, we could be more productive and waste less time. I yield the balance of my time.
Thanks, Senator McCosker. Senator Matt Hansen, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. Looking at the queue, this will probably be the final time I speak today. This is what I intended to talk about earlier. And I'm going to talk holistically about all these tax debates. And it's difficult for sometimes in these tax debates, both for me to follow, for others to follow, I presume the public to follow, because we jump from like what numbers we're talking about. And I don't necessarily mean like different data sources, but like what type of numbers we're talking about. Sometimes we're talking about the tax levied. Sometimes we're talking about the tax amount collected. Sometimes we're talking about per capita spending. Sometimes we're talking about holistic spending, and on and on and on. And that's the thing, is these are all valid numbers. These are all helpful numbers. These are all important numbers to look at. But sometimes you can use them in a way that paints part of a picture. For example, yesterday, and I believe this came from the consumption tax hearings, we heard a story about somebody who paid $90,000 in 1 year in property taxes. Paid $90,000 in 1 year in property taxes. And that is, in my mind, I heard that number, and that's I got sticker shock too, and that wasn't even my property tax bill. But I was thinking about it more and more. If that person pays $90,000 in property taxes, and they pay it at the same rate I do, which is almost exactly 2%, that means they own at least $4.5 million worth of property. And when you compare 90,000 to 4.5 million, the numbers matter. That might be too high. That might not be proportional to the income they derive off that land. The valuation might be wrong. There's things we could talk about there. But when you just talk about this person paid $90,000 in a vacuum, it only tells a bit of the story. And that's not to say you can't use that example or shouldn't use that example, but that's to say that all of us, when we start hearing these numbers, need to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. That's the same thing I think about when we talk about, property taxes collected or property tax increases. We talk about the property tax increases we've seen. And yes, property taxes have gone up in raw dollars paid. People are paying more out of their pocket in a lot of these communities. But the reason they're going up is not necessarily because the tax rate is going up. It's because the valuation is going up. That's the equivalent of saying you paid more in income tax because you got a raise. And that's something that can get your attention and you can want to solve, and it can be a problem and it can mess with your budget. I get all of that. But let's not pretend that, or let's not forget, I should say, I don't know if anybody's pretending, let's not forget that it's not necessarily rampant, incredibly high tax levies. It's the valuation. Again, if this is a valuation problem, that's something we could look at. But again, we're talking about doing all this through school funding and school taxing authorities. And the final thing I wanted to talk about, and I was having, somebody yesterday was asking me about this just in my personal life to kind of explain equalized school districts and the notion of that. And I was like, you know, the point of equalization aid is to equalize, so it inherently says that not all school districts are going to get it. That's kind of how we've designed it. For better or for worse, that's how we've designed it, that there's going to be some school districts that have enough local resources that they don't need state aid. I've dipped my toe in the water. I've said I've been interested in maybe looking at some sort of foundation aid, base aid. I can get there. But when we talk about the current equalization aid model doesn't fund all schools, it's like, yes, it doesn't fund some of the school districts that have lower tax levies and more local resources. And if there's a particular problem in a particular school district that doesn't fit that model, that the numbers don't work out, that the formula's unfair to them, we can talk about it. But in a lot of instances, we're asking to try and figure out a way to give more property tax relief to people who already pay lower tax levies on that property. And that's where we start getting into some of these difficulties.
1 minute.
So when we say, and we see this in all the things we've done, so the 2 tiers of 1107, one is based on valuation, one is based on school districts' taxes paid. We're trying to do some other things based on the caps based on school district taxes. We're trying to do some other things based on school bonding and all these different things. We're approaching it from all sorts of different angles. And when we start putting all these layers and layers and layers on, it starts getting really difficult to actually know when we pull this lever and raise this number or lower this number, what are the outcomes going to be? In part because we've piecemealed it all together because we've been focusing on different problems at different times. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Hansen. Senator Salami, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning again, colleagues. Like Senator Matt Hansen before me, I believe this will be my last time on the mic today. So I just wanted to close with a few thoughts just to wrap things up. But first, I have big news for the body. It's actually kind of cool. The University of Nebraska Regents just voted 7-0 to allow alcohol to be sold at Husker and Nebraska athletic events. So there's some applause going on. Big news. Something that's come up in debate today, and I think it's important that we address because this has been a theme in some of the debates we've had thus far this session, is portraying that everyone's united behind a bill, everyone's on board. When you hear that on the mic and you're a senator, you think, oh, that's actually really interesting. Especially with this bill and on other bills where this has been raised, that's unfortunately been false. All the schools are not on board with this bill. Even NERCSA, who came in support of LB 890, pointed out some really big issues with things like option funding and the 6 rural schools that would be held whole, which simply means that they're going to continue falling further behind their peers and having to increase their property taxes to pay their bills. Omaha Public Schools opposed LB 890, and last time I checked, they haven't changed their position. And moreover, the one thing when I look at the committee statement that doesn't appear is the testimony of the property taxpayers who are, busy working. They don't have a lobbyist. They don't have the time to take off of work and come down here and testify and go, you guys are going to raise our property taxes, send it to the bigger schools, and yeah, we get a few pennies for our rural schools, but it doesn't cover the losses we get from raiding the 1107 money. There's a really big difference between the lobby being unified behind a bill and everyone being on board for a bill. Senator Pansing Brooks had a bill up earlier this year where the County Attorneys Association had switched to proponents of a bill, but there were still individual county attorneys that were reaching out with concerns on the bill. So just because a lobby group says that they're on board, it doesn't mean that every single individual person that they represent is on board. We saw that last year with the debate on a law enforcement bill. There's a big split between urban and rural law enforcement, but the particular law enforcement lobbying group came in support, even though there was a large amount of dissension amongst the rural law enforcement officers over the bill. So I think it's important that when we're discussing and acting like everyone's singing Kumbaya about a bill, to read between the lines. And if the lobby is unified behind a bill, what that actually means. Because first off, on this bill, it's not true. And second off, that means that the lobby, not all Nebraskans, not all property taxpayers, not even all the schools are behind this bill. So with that, I will give the rest of the time back to the chair. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Salama. Senator Urban, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was listening to Senator Matt Hansen, his comments about if your valuation goes up, that doesn't necessarily mean your taxes go up. Well, Senator Friesen passed out a document yesterday that showed over the last 10 years how much taxes actually collected went up. And I've looked at all 93. I see not one of them, not one, stayed the same or even went down. Every one of them went up, and the average looks like about 4 to 5% annual increase in tax asking every year. And so don't stand up on the mic and say just because your valuation went up doesn't mean your taxes went up. Last year, my county assessor raised my value 16%, and everybody that collects taxes kept their mill levy the same. So guess what happened to my taxes? They went up. That's what happens. Senator Walz says all schools are on board with this. That's a false statement. I have gotten emails from schools in my district who have a significant portion of their students are option students. And if this is passed, they will no longer have option students. That's a problem. So I don't believe you can stand up and say all schools are on board. So we've had issues this last summer with education. Many people have showed up at the State Board of Education. And I want to give you a couple of definitions this morning. And I want you to see where you think our schools fall. We call them public schools. So if we have a public school and a parent or many parents show up at a school board meeting and they suggest that we want you to teach this certain thing in our school, that means the public would have input in what's taught. That would be a public school. What we have is something different. Many parents show up at school board meetings and share their opinions about what they're trying to teach, and it falls on deaf ears. So I don't know that that's a public school because the public doesn't have any input. A better definition may be a government school, because we're going to teach what the government wants to teach, irregardless of what you, the parent, want. Now, the other thing that you need to keep in mind, if you go to a school board meeting and you speak up and have an opinion, you very well may be called a terrorist. So tell me how someone going to something that they're supposedly supposed to be involved in, a public school, go and share with the public their opinion, how that's a terroristic threat. So you decide what definition best fits our school systems today. So this bill is basically what it is the inmates are running the asylum here. We have touted these superintendents as doing a yeoman's job of trying to get all the schools together. And we talk about all the schools being in unison on this, and they're not. And I think Senator Friesen and Senator Linehan have laid out quite eloquently what this bill actually does. And the longer we talk about it, the less enthusiastic I get. I was opposed to it when it started, but after hearing all the information I've heard about what it actually is going to do, I have now come to the point, and a lot of people say this, I am strongly opposed to 890. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that's more than what I normally am. I most normally use a red light, as you may know, but this is one where if I had two red lights, I'd use both of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Urban. Senator Vargas would like to welcome 18 students and 8 teachers from Creighton University in Omaha, along with 2 sponsors, one of whom is Rachel Gibson of the League of Women Voters. They are all seated in the north balcony. Please rise and be recognized by your Nebraska Legislature. Senator Breezy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And again, I want to thank Senator Waltz for her work on this, but at this time, I'm just not there for the reasons I've mentioned earlier, my concerns about the cap or control, my concerns about the disparity in how different schools are treated, and my concerns over jeopardizing $1107. And until somebody can suggest a way we can work around those concerns, how we can address those concerns, I can't be there. Senator DeBoer mentioned earlier, was asking rhetorically, how much is enough on property tax relief? And Senator DeBoer and others, it depends on who you ask. I think at a hearing last summer, I think a representative of a farm organization suggested we need another $900 million in property tax relief. I think that was the number I heard. And others have far less lofty goals. Myself, I've asked the Legislative Fiscal Office to compare tax collections in Nebraska, corporate and individual income taxes versus state and local and motor vehicle sales taxes versus net property taxes. And they didn't have current year data when I first asked for it. We did get some subsequent to that I think was biased because of some collection changes. So what I did is I went back to 19 and 20, and I pulled out the $548 million in property tax collections, and probably pulled out a little bit more from the growth in the property tax credit fund. And my back of the envelope math suggests that if you look at the three-legged stool, we're collecting roughly $600 million more in property taxes than income taxes, and roughly $700 million more in property taxes than state, local, and motor vehicle sales taxes. Again, back of the envelope, but I would stand by those numbers fairly well. But again, it depends on who you ask, depends on how you calculate it. And is a three-legged stool the right assessment of the need for property tax relief? I think a lot of folks would agree that it is. But again, that too depends on who you ask. But that would be my short answer to that question, Senator DeBoer. And with that, I would yield the balance of my time to Senator Linehan if she would like it.
Senator Linehan, 2 minutes 25.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Breezy, and thank you, Speaker. I'm going to, first of all, I need to thank the committee clerk of the Revenue Committee, because I asked him this morning if he could run down Dr. Cheryl Logan's testimony in front of the Education Committee, and he called the transcriber's office, and we have it. So yay for our staff all around the Capitol. And I will hand it out, pass it around as soon as I get done speaking here, because I think many things have been said on the floor. I can't remember exactly who said what in every committee, but I think it's to clear the record here. I'm going to read some of Dr. Logan's testimony. And I think it's good to remember that she has 1/6 of all the students in the state of Nebraska in the OPS system. She has a very big and very tough job. Our opposition is not something, I'm quoting her now, quote, "Our opposition is not something we take lightly. I had the opportunity, along with our legislative committee, to meet with Senator Walz and representatives of the Columbus schools to discuss in detail the plan that is embodied in LB 890 and LB 891. We highly respect the efforts of Senator Walz and Senator Lindstrom, and very much appreciate them including us in meetings and discussions
1 minute.
seeking to make the plan better." So I will wrap up here. They're against it for a couple of reasons. She comes from a state where she didn't control her own budget. She likes controlling her own budget. She knows that if the state ends up, this would put Omaha dependent, 71% of their budget would be dependent on the state. And she knows if we're in charge of 71% of her budget, pretty soon we'll be in charge of her school district. It's just common sense, which I find very refreshing. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Linehan. Senator Breezy. Senator Merman, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sitting in the Education Committee, 890 did purport to fix the broken TIOSA formula. We can all agree that the formula is broken. It doesn't collect taxes fairly, and it doesn't distribute them fairly around the state. It only really puts a temporary Band-Aid. 890 only really puts a temporary Band-Aid on the TIOSA formula. It does increase school funding to many of the rural districts, I guess probably all of the rural districts, but that's only temporary property tax relief, and that would quickly erode away because the 890 really doesn't have any substantial change to the formula. Right now with 1170, and those are the funds that 890 purports to use or will use to at least fund a large portion of 890. And those funds right now are guaranteed property tax relief. And somebody this morning asked, when will we be satisfied with property tax relief? And as Senator Breezy just mentioned, the three-legged stool would be a huge step in the right direction, as 1107 was. But you know, if we're going to redo the formula, we've got to at least stop there and at least have a large amount of assurance that the property tax relief provided will continue. And 1107 did more for property tax relief than anything in many years. So that is why this year I did make 723 my personal priority, Senator Breezy 723 my personal priority, because that's more than we've done in years to assure some property tax relief. It's going to be 25% this year, and you know, this is the first year that even 1107 provided property tax, a substantial amount of property tax relief, and we're talking about taking that away already when this is the first year that it's even been implemented in a substantial way. So in other words, we're raising property taxes to lower property taxes in another way, and then we have no assurance that we're going to continue to get that relief that we've assured ourselves. And by the way, it wasn't, it did surprise, I think, probably everybody in the legislature here that 1107 did get funded as large as it has been this quickly. But to be honest, it wouldn't have passed if everybody thought, you know, we were going to have this much property tax relief this soon with 1107. It wouldn't have passed because, to be honest, there's a large group of senators in here that aren't really that interested in property tax relief. You know, they give lip service all the time, but they're not really interested in actually giving property tax relief in any large amount. They're influenced by the large school districts, and you know, I understand that. You know, that's who's in their district, so that would be the influence that they would have on them.
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. So tax collections on a state level are collected from parts of the state that are least able to pay and distributed to parts of the state that really need it the least according to their income. And I thought it was really interesting, Senator Friesen's handouts that he had here this morning. the counties I represent, rural counties, in the per capita property tax collected, they're all in the upper half, really the upper quarter. There's no large populous counties in the upper part of, even hardly in the upper half of property tax collected per capita. But the populous counties are all in the upper quarter.
This time, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Merman. Senator Halloran, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, good morning. Part of what we do here, a great part of what we do here on many issues is pick winners and losers. And this is LB 890 is an example of that. Every school district in my district, District 33, other than Hastings and Kearney County, which I share that with Senator Breezy and Senator Lowe, and I'm glad to share that district with them. They all lose money except for the larger districts. They all lose money switching from 1107 to 890. In a handout that was provided by the Education Committee, and it goes through projections of the savings based on NDE's model of LB 890 amended by 1756. Bottom line is this. Adams Central loses $706,901. Axtell Community Schools lose $341,841. Bertrand Public Schools, $232,761. Kennesaw Schools, $154,606. Loomis Schools, $622,316. Minden Schools, $272,000. Silver Lake, $214,000. Now, when you add all those up, that's $2,544,000 less revenue with 890 than they're receiving with 1107. Winners and losers. They're going to lose. Hastings Public Schools gains $2,436,000, almost the same as all those small schools, almost the same as all those smaller rural schools are losing. Hastings picks up. Now, I'm not going to make friends with the Hastings Public Schools by talking about this, but the fact of the matter is this is picking winners and losers, and we should do less of that. We should be talking about picking more winners and winners. Let's talk for a second about option enrollment. I understand option enrollment is an opportunity. Sometimes it's a geographic choice, right? When you're close to a school, school A, but you're assigned to school B, which is some distance away. So sometimes it's a matter of geography, distance from the school. Sometimes it's a matter of school choice. I know we don't like to talk about that in this body, and we don't like to vote to enhance some degree of school choice, but open enrollment gives the opportunity for people to move from one school to another based upon whether or not they think it best fits their child. Well, it's my understanding, and I will stand corrected if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that that option enrollment goes away, right? Well, someone has to tell me then, if that goes away, what schools are going to receive students from another district? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It averages somewhere around $10,000 of money that walks with the child to a new school if they do open enrollment. So if that money doesn't go with them, and the parents opt for their child to do open enrollment, go to a different school, that new school that picks up that child doesn't have the revenue flow with them. Someone has to tell me how that will work. It won't work. So I'm clearly opposed to LB 890 as amended by 1756, and I will yield my time back to the chair.
Thanks, Senator Halloran. Senator Linehan, you recognized.
I am going to ask Senator Walls or somebody else on the Education Committee a question, but I'm going to say the question so that I don't catch them off guard. On page 3 of the bill, at the bottom, it's subsection 2, reduce the reliance on property tax for support of public school system to the median level of reliance on property taxes for the support of public schools in other states. So my question will be, what is that percentage?
Senator Walls, would you yield?
I will find out that percentage, Senator Linehan.
Okay, thank you. I know I'm a big history buff, so maybe I do this too much, but the $548 million is not that big of a shock. 3 years ago, when we were working on, and I'm not as good as Friesen, Senator Groding, and Senator Friesen, and Senator Breezy about remembering all the numbers, but when we worked on all of those bills, what was agreed to by the governor and appropriations, that there was $514 million we could use to increase state funding to the schools. So we had $514 million over 3 years. That's what the budget showed we could get to. So I, for one, am not shocked that we're at 548 million. And it's probably some of the irritation you hear from the people that worked on that. One of the reasons we're irritated is because we had the 514 million right there. Please take the money with these guardrails, that it actually works. And every school system said no. And they said no because we tried to cap valuation increases. And as far as I understand, LB 890, and somebody gets up next that can correct me, we have a new maximum levy for every school district, which in my school district, I think in Elkhorn, it's 77 cents, which is a lot better, as I said yesterday, than $1.05. But if I understand, 2/3 of the school board can vote to override that, up to $1.05. And there is nothing in the bill, as I understand it, that controls valuation increases. And if I'm to believe all the realtors, things I get in my emails, in Elkhorn, our valuations went up, are going up 8, 9, 10% a year. So even if we leave the levy at 77 cents and valuations go up 10%, my property taxes, even when we do all of this, are still going to go up 10% a year. So that's the problem, folks. This may actually work for a couple of years, but it will not work long-term because we're doing nothing to address valuation increases. And that was the hard stop we got 2 years ago. Unless we do something to address valuation increases, you cannot fix school funding. Now, the schools are also facing a problem, and I'm sympathetic to this. And this is why we got to keep working on this. I agree with Senator Walls and Senator Colterman, Senator Lindstrom, all of us. We've got to keep working on this because the way the current law works, when valuations go up, we're going to catch up. Maybe we won't catch up with ag, but if valuations start going up 10% a year in residential, their TOSA aid drops because their local effort rate is going to go up. So what happened to ag for the last decade to 12 years is now happening to residential. So I have empathy that this is a huge problem. That's not, and I know we're getting close to hopefully the end of today. This is not to say we don't have an issue. It's not to say that we don't need to keep working on it. But again, it's got to be the whole thing. You can't put the money out with no guardrails and think your property taxes are going to stay low. Because unless we address valuations, that's not going to work. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Linehan. Senator Bosselman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I looked at 890, I had one chart comes out, savings versus tax credit on it. Half of my school districts, as tax credit that the property owners in my area would lose is 2.5 million in that. So that's a challenge for me, that no matter if you go with the AM or with a bill, either way, half of my schools. One way you lose 2.5 million that this could be paid by the property tax owners. The other one's almost 2.3 million. So those are concerns of mine. I wonder if Senator Erdman would yield to a question or two.
Senator Erdman, will you yield?
Be glad to.
Senator Erdman, do you have a tax proposal that's been heard in revenue?
I do, Senator Bossman. It's called the consumption tax, and we had a great hearing last Thursday.
Was there anybody come in and testify in support of that?
There were 29 taxpayers that came from as far away as Scotts Bluff, all across the state. Some agricultural people, residential people from Omaha, Broken Bow, significant people, 29 different people shared their story. Senator Bossman, not one repeated each other.
And they were from Omaha as well as further out west, rural, both?
The majority of them were from Omaha and Lincoln.
Thank you. Could you tell me a little bit more about consumption tax? What is it? What is that bill?
Senator Bossman, it is an opportunity for us, as I've said many times on the mic, to change our focus from those who collect and spend the tax dollars to those who pay. So the consumption tax would be a tax placed on the consumables of each individual at the point of sale, or a service they hired for an individual, like mowing your lawn or getting a haircut, and it would remove or replace inheritance tax, sales tax, income tax, corporate and individual, property tax, personal and real. It's a revenue neutral opportunity for us to collect the same number of tax dollars from a different source than we do now.
Would you say those people who came in to testify in support or written position letters were pretty passionate?
Senator Bossman, in the back of the room, there was a lady that when the people were testifying about what taxes are doing to them, she was sobbing or crying. And after the hearing, I asked her, what was it that moved you to tears? And she said, the stories that were told, and with the compassion that they told those, and it moved her to think that we are putting people out of their homes, out of their businesses, and away from their farm and ranches by our excessive taxes.
So was there testimony in that during that hearing that may have said that a family is probably going to could potentially lose their livelihood because their property taxes are so high?
Yes, there was one gentleman that testified that he had moved from Nevada. He didn't come and testify, but he sent a letter in that he moved from Nevada here, and he couldn't, in his good conscience, allow his children to inherit his ranch because the property taxes were so high, he didn't think they'd be able to make it.
So with your bill, what that would do is that consumption, if I consume a new product, what it might be, then I pay tax on it. But if it's something that's used, if it's something that's maybe food items, certain ones, if you're at a certain poverty, certain income level, it wouldn't apply to you. Is that right?
What we have proposed, Senator Bossman, we proposed that each individual in the state of Nebraska, each legal resident would get a prebate,
1 minute.
which is basically a rebate in advance to offset any consumption tax they would have to pay up to the poverty level. And that includes everyone, including Warren Buffett, would get a prebate up to the poverty level times the consumption tax rate. And so there's no cliff effect. If you are making $12,800, if that's the poverty level for $12,800, and you make $40,000 as an individual, you still get the prebate. So there's no cliff effect. We will hold low-income people harmless, medium-income people, it'll be an advantage. And what will happen is the people who have more money will pay more consumption tax because they buy more consumables.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate the conversation we had on the mic. This is what we're talking about, folks, is people across the state of Nebraska, it's that property tax and how to fix it. We've talked about 1107 and a lot of other areas, but this is affecting a number of people, both in the city and in smaller communities and farmers and ranchers. And what I'm seeing, projections for mine.
Thank you, Senator Bossman and Senator Erdman. Speaker Hilgers for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. At the request of Senator Walls, the primary sponsor of LB 890, I'm going to put a speaker hold on this particular bill, which means it won't come back this year absent an agreement amongst the sponsor and the proponents and the primary opponents of the bill. With that, we are going to end for the week. Everyone have a great weekend. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Clerk for items.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Appropriations, chaired by Senator Stinner, refers Legislative Bill 937, 988, and 991 to general file. Additionally, your Committee on Revenue, chaired by Senator Linehan, reports Legislative Bill 776 and 283 CA to general file. Your Committee on Enrollment Review reports Legislative Bills 906 and 700 as examined and placed on select file, both having E&R amendments. Senator Hughes designates Legislative Bill 1015 as his personal priority. Notice that LB 310 was presented to the governor this morning at 9:50. Name add Senator Slama to LB 1085, Senator Gurney and Senator Williams both to LR 284. The Appropriations Committee will have an executive session in room 1307 at noon. Appropriations 1307 at noon. Finally, Mr. President, a priority motion. Senator Hilgers would move to adjourn the body until Monday, February 14th at 10 o'clock a.m.
Colleagues, you all heard the motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. All opposed? We are adjourned.